Hello there. Going to put this under the playlist history, government, politics, of course. This is a video about the Bill of Rights and what was said about that in the Federalist Papers, articles written in favor of the Constitution in 1787, 1788 by Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison. There was a series of articles also called the Anti-Federalist Papers, which was newspaper articles written under alias. Both of them were written under alias names, arguing against the Constitution. So get a little background. First of all, I see people put stuff on Facebook all the time, this and that about the Bill of Rights, usually the Second Amendment. And there was a guy on Facebook that was talking about gun restrictions or whatever, and he was saying if the Second Amendment is what the whole Constitution rests upon and all of that. And I said to him, I said, well, when I said in the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton argued against the Bill of Rights and actually pointed out that it was dangerous. And he was saying, oh, he was a big government guy back in the 1780s, whatever, and all that. That really was kind of like not the point of what I was saying. However, I said, and I got the impression that this person named Sean had not actually, in fact, read the Federalist Papers. I've read the whole, I have it in a 1945 edition, the Federalists, and I just read one a day. One of the things that stood out, a lot of things stood out, like they were saying, well, what if the government passes? Like there was the whole point or the whole theme of the Federalist Papers articles was like point counterpoint. They would present the argument, here's why we shouldn't have the Constitution. And then there was a counterpoint. Well, here's why we should. Now, remember, the United States did have a Constitution from 1781 when it was ratified until 1788. 7 years. That was the Articles of Confederation. So from 1776 to 81 was like a provisional government, ad hoc government, so to speak. And the states got together and said, we'll adopt the Articles of Confederation, which gave the federal government, right, the Confederate U.S. government, limited powers. Then after only 6 years, they decided, oh, it's not working. There's too many problems. We need to have a conference in Philadelphia to reform, update, improve the Constitution, the Articles. Well, that's where conspiracy theorists, and they may be on the right track, say, oh, well, they knew all along they were going to overthrow the Constitution, the original one, and make a new Constitution, which today we call the Constitution. And that was just their excuse. Could be, I don't know. The thing about that is that you still had checks and balances on that, because remember that you still had to get it approved by the committee, the convention. Well, if they were all in on it, okay, in on it, then they're going to vote to approve it. But then you would have to have, what was it, 13 states? You had to, what they say, 9 out of 13 states had to approve it. Now, Rhode Island didn't want to approve it. They said, we're not going to approve it. It's going to set up an empire dictatorship, so to speak, and take away the rights of the states. But then when all the other states were doing it and it was going into effect, then they just say, well, we'll join. They did not have to join. Rhode Island could have remained a separate country, independent country. Just it could have been the United States of America and then Rhode Island by itself. But they say, oh, well, in 88, we'll just join because we got no choice. I mean, they did have a choice, but they didn't see that they had a good choice. All right, so, but there were a lot of things in the argument, point, counterpoint. And if you read this, like one of the things was, well, what if they pass a law that's unconstitutional, that violates people's rights? Then Hamilton, Jay, and Madison's counterpoint was, well, you could just refuse to follow it. Looks like Rhode Island was right. Yeah, Eric says, looks like they were right. But you see, we're looking back in time through the lens of history. So I already did a video about the slavery issue and the Constitution. That was a very good video, and I showed very clearly, you can't really refute it. I mean, you could refute it by saying, oh, I don't like the Constitution. You could be like William Lloyd Garrison. Okay, fine. But you can't say that the Southerners had an incorrect interpretation of the Constitution. They clearly had the law on their side. I mean, that's you would have to have a child's mentality to argue against that. Some people do have a child's mentality. But so that was a very good video. And that clearly demonstrated that the Southern states were on the right legal side. Now, some people will say, well, let's talk about the morality of it. We could talk about that. But that wasn't the legal argument. That wasn't the argument that I was making. The argument I was making is that according to the Constitution, the South was right. Clearly the case. You really can't argue against that. All right, now, enjoy the decline. So was that war really only about slavery? Well, that's what they say on TV, but we know better. People that study Constitution and history know that it was clearly not really about that at all. Beer Hounds says, what up, homies? Hello, Beer Hound. Thanks for watching. Yeah, the slavery issue and the war against the South. You know, that's a what you call it, it's like a straw man argument. You know, you just throw that in there to get people off track of the real idea behind all of it. And like I said in that past video, I said that war was, I said to bring up the issue of slavery is a totally irrelevant topic, which seems like a crazy idea, right? Talk about the War of 1861 and say slavery was an irrelevant topic. Legally, it was, but that's another. Well, the video's already made. It's already posted. So here, Hamilton, I'm no great fan of Hamilton. You know, he wanted to make the United States like the British Empire. He was part of the rebels, all right? So he favored seceding. Talk about secession, right? I like how people that say, that this is an irony. People say the South was wrong because they seceded from the great America. And secession is always wrong because they don't ever explain why. I said, well, didn't the United States secede from Great Britain? And we have a holiday for that, don't we? Independence Day. People think but actually most Americans think Independence Day is something to do with barbecuing, hot dogs, pork and beans, and beer, and coleslaw. Literally, I think if you ask most Americans, what is the 4th of July about? They would say, well, because you got to drink a lot and eat pork and beans and hot dogs and my daddy barbecues. And that would really literally be their insightful viewpoint of the 4th of July. Ran out of coffee yesterday, so rough start this morning. Oh, man, sorry. If I ran out of coffee, I have to run to the store. Couldn't take it. All right, so let's go on. So that was one point. They were saying in the Federalist Papers, well, you say they'll pass laws that are going to violate people's rights. And then Hamilton and Jay and Madison were saying, no, you don't have to follow an illegal law. If it's an unconstitutional law, each state could declare it void, null and void. You know, that nullification concept that the South promoted back in the 1800s, nullification and interposition. They could place themselves between the U.S. government and their people. Well, actually, that comes from the Federalist Papers. So the Confederate states and the Southern states were using the argument of the people that wanted to set up the Constitution to argue in the favor of that practice. So, but obviously, you don't even need that on its face. If anybody would pass, if the government, U.S. government, passed a law that violated the Constitution, then you don't have to follow it. I mean, clearly you don't have to follow it. So, because it violates what was the Constitution? It was a contract between the states. and we the people, so to speak. But the people, obviously didn't really. The common people didn't develop it. It was lawyers from each state, constitutional lawyers and bigwigs from each state. But whatever, the states ratified it. They said the state governments ratified it. And they were saying in the Federalist Papers here, what if the government got so tyrannical that they were just running roughshod over people? Alexander Hamilton said, well, you do what we did in 1775, just rise up and overthrow the government. It would basically, it would invalidate itself. It would excommunicate itself. You know what I'm saying? It would like declare itself null and void by virtue of its actions. So you wouldn't be obligated to follow it. That's not William Lloyd Garrison's argument, by the way, the big abolitionist. William Lloyd Garrison never said that the U.S. government violated the Constitution by enforcing slavery. He said the Constitution was evil because it enforced and validated, and legalized, continued the legalization of slavery. That's why William Lloyd Garrison took a copy of the Constitution, what was it, in 1831, and burned it in Boston. He literally burned a copy of the Constitution and said that the Constitution itself was evil because it made slavery perpetually legal, actually, and required slaves be returned to their owners, which actually the Constitution required. So William Lloyd Garrison, you say, well, he supported bad things. He was an evil guy. Okay, fine, but he had a legal mind. He had a lawyer mentality, so he knew the Constitution defended slavery. So that's why he burned the Constitution. See, so he was an actual rebel against the whole United States government. You could say committing treason against the U.S. government. I would obviously support that he was doing that. But anyway, that's another story. So now people kept saying the Constitution is bad. Let's look at a few comments. I just growled at this cashier. Plenty of laws these days violate the Constitution, and if you don't follow, you get a beating from the boys in blue. I think a lot of people would agree with that statement. Is that moonshine you're drinking? Burley Sullivan says, no, it's tap water. No ice. I don't like ice water. All right. So one of the big arguments was that the Constitution did not have a Bill of Rights, like in England, to protect people's rights from the government. And people like Thomas Jefferson and a lot of people, not just in the South, a lot of them were in south of the Mason-Dixon line, but up north too, anti-federalists saying, no, you're setting up an empire. What we have is okay. We just need to improve it. And this Constitution is going to create an empire, and the United States government will be an imperial power. I mean, yes, that did turn out to be the case. But Hamilton, like I said, who wanted to create an American empire similar to Great Britain, but in a different format, you understand? But he was Anglophile. He liked the idea of the British Empire. He liked the idea of a superpower, Great Britain, running the world. Basically, running the world. Sort of a Freemasonic viewpoint of civilization. But he thought America had a lot of potential to continue that or to expand that in conjunction and maybe in partnership with the British Empire, which, of course, as we know, is exactly what happened. Because like the Monroe Doctrine, the open door policy, you've heard of the Monroe Doctrine, the open door policy. Those were actually created by the British Foreign Office, but they were issued under American presidents to give it a better framing. Things look better when you frame them correctly. So the land of the free, the democratic country, is going to promote the Monroe Doctrine and the open door policy. Okay, but so you don't like history, do you? No, I don't like it. Not to be off topic, but what other brands would you recommend to someone who enjoys most of the Founders lineup? Oh, Panther Cub, Dirty Bastard. Their CBS, if they ever bring it back. Their KBS. I would just say buy anything they make and try it. They're not going to all be winners, but they're going to mostly be winners. And the price isn't too extraordinarily high, so I just say buy it all. I haven't bought them all either, but I bought most. Governor Morris is underrated. Governor Morris. Hello and good day. This is Michael Hill. Same to you. Okay, let's get to the crux of the matter. Like Rush, the band Russia. Let's get to the heart of the matter. All right. So Thomas Jefferson and them were saying, we need a Bill of Rights like they have in England and to protect the people's rights. Now, Alexander, and we're not going to support the Constitution unless we get a Bill of Rights. Well, eventually they got a Bill of Rights. That was the deal. That was the deal. The deal. Okay, we'll agree. This is the anti-federalists say. We'll agree to support the Constitution, or at least not oppose it, if you, the constitutional proponents, the pro-federalists, agree that once it's adopted, you'll institute a Bill of Rights. Okay, they made the deal. Like Sonny. You'll make the deal, Sonny. Okay. So they made the deal. 1791, the 10 Bill of Rights got passed. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution were passed. Now, but Alexander Hamilton said, you're making a terrible mistake. And I agree with Alex. I told you, I do not like Alexander Hamilton, really. But he was right. They did make a terrible mistake. Here's his argument. I agree with this. He says in number 84, Federalist paper number 84. He says, the most considerable of the remaining objections is that the plan of the convention contains no Bill of Rights. He says, in answer to that, he talks about, well, it does really, because it says Section 9, Clause 2, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States. No person holding any office of profit or trust under them, the states, without the consent of the Congress, except any present emolument, office, or title of any kind whatsoever from any king, prince, or foreign state. Article 3, the trial of all crimes except in cases of impeachment shall be by jury, and such trial shall be held in the state where the crime shall have been committed, but when not committed within in any state, like in a territory or out at the high seas, the trial shall be at such place or places that the Congress may by law have directed. And then he talked about the treason, Section 3 about treason and so on. He said, it may well be a question whether these are not upon the whole of equal importance. Oh, wait, he was saying, I'm not going to go into all these details. Well, he's saying that, see, these are the Bill of Rights because they're telling you right there it's embedded in the Constitution. They can't do these things. And then he said, secondly, well, here, I'm going to read it. Now, here's an important point. So do you have Stater brothers there? Stater brothers? Now that you mention it, there is a story of America being founded as a free, quote unquote, nation by the Masons. This is why in America they began to call themselves not Masons, but Freemasons. I think they were called Freemasons in England from the 1700s, though. The York Rite and the Scottish Rite, because they were like free thinkers, meaning they were masters of their own mind, uncontrolled by papal forces, meaning they they were free of Roman Catholicism, the magisterium of the Catholic Church, which it really meant. Sort of like in the Garden of Eden, remember the serpent said, he doesn't want you to know what's really going on. If you eat of this tree of knowledge of good and evil, you can be a god. And so that's what, the Freemasons say. Don't listen to those, sticklers, those prudes. They want to take your fun away and blah, blah, blah. They don't want you to be really free. So, but this video is not about that. Right. You're right, North. That's right, Luciferian doctrine. Okay. I've been reading a book by Madame Helena Blavatsky. She talks all about that. In favor of it too, by the way. Now, so he says, it has been several times truly remarked that bills of rights are in their origin stipulations between kings and their subjects, abridgments of prerogative in favor of privilege, reservations of rights not surrendered to the prince. Such was the Magna Carta, obtained by the barons, sword in hand, from King John. Such were the subsequent confirmations of that charter by succeeding princes. Such was the petition of right assented to by Charles I in the beginning of his reign. Such also was the Declaration of Right presented by the Lords and Commons, both houses of Parliament, to the Prince of Orange, William of Orange, in 1688, and afterwards thrown into the form of an act of Parliament called the Bill of Rights. Well, that was 1689. So see, he's saying, they keep bringing up the Bill of Rights in England. He said the Bill of Rights in England is not the same. He said because the Bill of Rights in England is restricting the vast powers of the monarch. It's saying the monarch can't do these specific things or must do these specific things. And everything else we don't mention, he can still do or she can still do. He said, we're not in a monarchy. We're supposed to be we the people. We are creating the states and the people are creating this government. So now you got it backwards. He's saying you're thinking in reverse. Jacobites. Oh, yeah, the Jacobites were the adherents, the ones who adhered to the Stuart family, James II, the King James II and his son, who were overthrown by these people in 1688. Anyway, it is evident, therefore, that now, see, this is what Hamilton says. It is evident, therefore, that according to their primitive signification, they have no application to constitutions, professedly founded upon the power of the people and executed by their immediate representatives and servants. Here in strictness, now, you see, I think these people that I talk to on Facebook, they don't read this. They don't read the papers. They just look at memes like something making fun of Nancy Pelosi or whatever. That's all they look at. Here in strictness, the people surrender nothing. The people, listen to this quote, the people surrender nothing. And as they retain everything, they have no need of and as they retain everything, they have no need of particular restrictions. We, the people of the United States, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Here is a better recognition of popular rights than volumes of those aphorisms which make the principal figure in several of our state bill of rights and which would sound much better in a treatise of ethics than in a constitution of government. So see what he's saying? He's saying the people never gave the U.S. government the power to tell you you can't say what you want. All right. So this is what he's trying to say. We created a constitution, a proposed constitution at this time, of course, wasn't ratified till 88. We proposed the constitution and we delegated certain particular powers to this national government, which was later established in DC. Once DC was built, they had to build Washington, DC first. It was just swamp land. All the other powers we didn't delegate, you still retain. See, I've heard some people say, the Bill of Rights gives me the freedom of speech. No, the Bill of Rights does not give you anything. That's what Alexander Hamilton's trying to say. The Bill of Rights does not give you the freedom of speech. You have it already. You're born with that freedom. See, you're born with it. And people will tell me, oh, the Second Amendment gives me the right to bear arms. I said, the Second Amendment doesn't give you a doggone thing. The Second Amendment is a piece of paper in a museum, in a building in Washington, D.C. You're born with the right, you see. That's what Hamilton's saying. They're not giving you the right to bear arms. You're born with that right. And that's why Louisiana's about to change the law, because they had a law where you could carry a concealed weapon if you went to this training course and you paid $100 and all of this. So you could pay 4 payments of $25. But now they have some Hamiltonians and some old constitutionalists, you know, in the South. I live in the South. They always did have I think, a little better handle on the Constitution than in the northern states. No knock against the North. I have many northern beer friends. They're good at drinking beer. I didn't say they were good at the Constitution. But anyway, I just think generally the southern states who tended to descend from the Cavaliers in England, you know, the Cavalier people, the Cavalier faction, whereas the Yankees, the Northerners, tended to descend from the Roundheads, you know, that Cromwellian thinking, the Puritans, who almost always had a tyrannical mindset, you know, this, it's in our best interest to control the world, you know, that, the Puritan thinking. The South had more of a Cavalier, Charles II thinking of, no, you let the people be free and don't be a dictator over all these people. And all of that. So so that's what Hamilton's saying. You don't, now we're going to read more. Any more comments? The idea that, okay, I meant cheers. Cheers, Louisiana Beer Reviews, interesting discussion, says Tommy. Thank you. North Life Hollywood says, the idea that we need to be given rights and freedoms by the government is the same as saying the government is God. Right. Many people believe that. And now we have people that they don't go to church so much anymore in America. And this was, you know, by design. You know, nefarious forces in our culture have been working to get people separated from God and the church. You know, you have Martin Luther's revolution in 1517, separate people from the true church. That's step one, plan one, from outer space, from hell maybe. And then step two, separate people from these little pretend churches, which died away anyway. You see that Protestant church attendance is horrible. Their teachings are like termite infested wood. They can't stand on anything. And they all died away. You know, they're all Methodist church. You want to go hear some echoes, go to Methodist church, be empty. Church of Disciples of Christ, Presbyterian, Episcopal. Well, because it's like the Bible talk, you built your house upon sand at the beach, and when the waves hit, it fell apart. It was no foundation. So it would make sense that you would have a falling away, as the Bible predicted, a falling away from the truth. So then people might think that the government is God, a God, the God. And then make all these ridiculous arguments. Alexander Hamilton says, yeah, nefarious forces, that's putting it mildly. Yeah, well, you can't go too far here. Louisiana Beer Reviews, what's your feeling about the right to life? Well, of course, I believe people have a right to life. And I think that clears up everything. Anybody who argues against it would believe that people don't have a right to life. And that's a very easy argument to win. I mean, you could snuff that argument out in 10 seconds. That's why they won't come on this channel and argue, because they can't, you know. I mean, it's impossible. Adam and Eve were banished from the Garden of Eden for intaking within themselves the fruit of the tree of good and evil. God guarded the tree of eternal life so they will not become like him, gods. Well, at least think they were like him, you see. And anyway, they had free will. They were in paradise on earth. Like you see heaven on earth. What did the girl from the Go-Go's sing? Heaven is a place on earth. Well, actually, it was in a way. Heaven and earth were united, but through they had free will. They threw that away, and then we inherit. Now, I'm a Baptist. Not sure if you count that as a Protestant. It is, yeah. Enjoy the decline. Now, Baptists will claim they're not Protestant. We're not. You know, Baptists have an interesting viewpoint. They'll claim they're the true church, going back to the ancient world, but they're not. They just say. But they say, I used to be Baptist, so I should know, right? They'll say, well, we are before the Reformation. We were around before the Reformation, baptizing babies and all this. I mean, baptizing adults, rejecting infant baptism and all this. Well, it's true. They were around before Martin Luther's Reformation, because you had a situation of, well, you know, in the early centuries, you had the Gnostics, Gnostics, the Gnostics, Gnosticism, which was anti-Catholic, you know. And there was like a huge civil war in the Roman Empire between the Catholics and the Gnostics, the Arians, and the Gnostics lost, but they didn't go away. They just lost, you know. They went underground, so to speak, because they weren't going to be allowed to operate in the open. The emperors who were in league with the you know, remember the Catholic Church and the Roman government was the same thing. There was no separation of church and state. So they went down and operated in secret societies, you understand? And you had the Bogomils in what we call Bulgaria today, and the Waldenses in France, and the Albigenses in like southeastern France, border Italy. And they taught a lot of Gnostic ideology. And you could see a lot of that thinking in the Baptist theology. And that's where you get these things like don't drink alcohol, some weird fixations on sex and dancing and all, because that was the Gnostic viewpoint of the world, that the material world was evil. The material world, itself was evil. Hold on, I'm fixing this chair. And so, and the Catholic Church say, no, you got it all wrong. That's like coming from the devil. You know, that's like satanic teaching. You have this warped view. You're not going to. Well, anyway, we won't even get into that. Okay. But it does have some relation to the Constitution, actually, in the French Revolution in particular. But here's what Hamilton says. I go further and affirm that Bill of Rights, in the sense and to the extent in which they are contended for, are not only unnecessary in the proposed Constitution, but would even be dangerous. So this is what Hamilton's saying. They're not only unnecessary, they're dangerous. You say, why would the Bill of Rights be dangerous? He's going to explain it. Now, see, all they did on Facebook was like make fun of me when I said, you know, Hamilton said, oh, well, you don't like the Bill of Rights, dude. I'm like, no, I didn't say that. I said, do you understand what I'm saying? Apparently not. They would contain various exceptions to powers not granted. Listen to this carefully. The Bill of Rights, which we know the Bill of Rights, would contain various exceptions to powers not granted, and on this very account would afford a colorable pretext to claim more than were granted. He says, for why declare that things shall not be done which there is no power to do? Why, for instance, should it be said that the liberty of the press shall not be restrained when no power is given by which restrictions may be imposed? So you see, this is a very important point, and I would say you're never going to see this on CNN. You're never going, well, you certainly wouldn't see it there. You're never going to see it on MSNBC, and you're not even going to see it on Fox and on these other ones, because I don't think most of those people understand the Constitution. They don't seem to when you watch them. So Then he talks about the liberty of the press, and he goes on and on. So, but I got down to the main point. He's saying, why do you need to restrict the government from doing what they do not have the power to do? He said, what you're doing is you're implying that they actually have that power. So Hamilton made a very good point. He's saying, okay, look at the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Alexander Hamilton said, well, why would you pass that amendment? They don't have that power. You're implying that they somehow have that power. Or the right to bear arms shall not be, whatever the word is, impaired or whatever. I can't remember the word. He said, well, they don't have the power to take away your guns. So why would you tell them you don't have the power to take away the guns when they don't have the power to take away the guns or restrict weapons? It's a double negative. What's a double negative? It's a positive. He said, what you're doing is you're giving them the power that they don't have by implication. You're fearing an empire, but you're creating it. And now we know, look at the situation at hand today. Here comes a train. So now look, people say, oh, now just what Hamilton predicted, the Bill of Rights, First Amendment, what does it say about the militia, then the right to bear. So now the liberals who don't want you to have that right anyway are saying, look, it's about a militia. It's saying a militia, which they saying is a National Guard, can have guns. You can't. You personally can't. And if it was up to them, the liberals, you wouldn't have a right to bear arms. And freedom of speech, and so on. So Alexander Hamilton made a wonderful argument. You do not have to restrict people from doing what they have no power to do. It wasn't delegated to the U.S. government. There was nowhere in the Constitution where it said the U.S. government can pass laws telling you what to say. So consequently, that was reserved to the states and the people. So Hamilton was trying to tell people, if the government passed a law violating your freedom of speech, you could just out of hand ignore it because they have no power to do it. But now you're passing an amendment telling them they have no power to do what they have no power to do. And that's the same problem with the 10th Amendment. Any power not given to the U.S. government is reserved to the states and the people. Well, it already was reserved to the states and the people. You don't need to make that statement. But then, of course, the people have to be educated and understand the Constitution. Most people are not particularly well educated, and they certainly do not understand the Constitution, whether they're liberals or neoconservatives. Now, maybe paleoconservatives to some extent understand the Constitution. Most of the libertarians don't. When I get into conflicts with libertarians, they have an incredible misunderstanding of federalism, for one thing. And I tell them, I say, do you know what a federation is? A federal republic? Well, no, they don't. Too busy smoking marijuana and, selling pornography, whatever they do. These libertarians will just get you. Now they'll say, oh yeah, man, you can serve whoever you want at your restaurant, man. That's an okay thing, man. You don't have to serve anybody. I understand libertarian principles, man. I'm like, you don't really understand them, because like every libertarian I ever met was saying, oh yeah, I love the Supreme Court decision saying that you can't restrict people's freedom of marriage. Everybody has the right to marry who they want, man. Love is universal, man. I was like, you're ignorant. Obviously I wasn't making a put down. I wasn't saying it as a pejorative. They literally were ignorant. I say, you do not clearly understand A, the Constitution, and B, federalism. I just tell them, you do not understand the Constitution and you do not understand federalism. But I guess I'll tell you what, I'm going to explain that to you right now here on Facebook. Well, the next thing, you don't see their name popping up anymore because, they blocked you. And it's like, why did they block you? Because you're too heavy, man. You're full of racial hatred. It's like, no, I was talking about the Constitution, dingbat. Now that was a put down. But, you have to call it as you see it. It's like, no, I was telling you, you do not understand federalism. Do you know what federalism is? I asked a clear question to this libertarian. Do you know what libertarianism? Can you explain that to me? Blocked. Has nothing to do with racism. Has nothing to do with past injustices. Has nothing to do with atrocities of world wars or anything like that. It's a clear and easy to understand question. What can you tell me about federalism? This is not a hard question. Just answer the question. If you have to block me because I asked you to explain federalism, that's telling me you don't know about the government. You don't know about libertarianism. You know about smoking marijuana, getting high, and driving around in a van and go and see your friend Teddy and go and hang out and play video games. That's all I can tell you. I don't know. You over here pontificating about the law and publishing memes all day. But when I ask you clear questions about the Constitution, you're going to block people. You know what I'm talking about, this social media mania, this like sickness that goes around. Now that, okay, let's look at the, the rain is back. I can't believe it. Well, I can't believe it. I'm looking at it. But anyway, let's look at the comments and we're going to get off of here because I have a beer review to do. And it is a new beer from Devil's Backbone. And Douglas sent it to me from Virginia. And I'm going to be the first person in the world to review this beer. But I have a bad feeling I'm going to say some nasty things about it. I'm tired of buying craft beers that taste suspiciously like Miller High Life. It's like, why am I buying a 4.5% alcohol craft beer that's a lager that tastes like Miller High Life? Why am I doing that? No answer? You got no answer? Of course you got no answer because there's no good answer. Well, that's another rant. Now that you mentioned the Gnostics, I definitely see the relationship there. I would love to see you do a video on what's going more in depth at some point so I can hear more of your point of view. Oh, thank you. I have to learn more about it. Enjoy the decline. But see, I used to be Baptist and I would notice a lot of strange things they would say, a lot of really strange things. And when I would ask about it, not argue about it or say make a contention or uproar about it, just simply ask. They were not receptive and they would be kind of hostile, and I just was trying to figure, I was saying, well, what are you talking about? And when I started interacting with the Catholics, well, I live in a mostly Catholic area, but they were always like really obsessed with Catholics. That was another thing that got me nervous about the Baptists. They would like talk about Catholics all day long. Catholics, the Catholics. I was like, why are we talking about Catholics? You said, okay, their religion is trash and we're the true faith. And so, okay, let it go. Why are you talking about it all day? That's all you talk about. And they would be nasty about it, and they would make jokes. Like a lot of these Baptists were from Alabama and Mississippi, and they worked at refineries here along the river. That's why they lived in Louisiana. They would go on and on. Oh, all these Catholics. All these Catholics, man. I'm like, well, you live here? They say, well, we work at Marathon. We work at DuPont. We work at Shell. I say, oh. So you move down here to make money, but you hate all the people. And then you just feel like it's your prerogative or something to go around and tell everybody that you hate them because they're Catholic. If I move to Alabama, let's say I move to Alabama, I'm trying to think of a town, Greenville, whatever, Alabama, to get a job. And everybody was Baptist or Methodist. I wouldn't immediately march around town telling everybody I hate them because they're Baptist and Methodist. In fact, I wouldn't ever mention that. In fact, I wouldn't even care. But they would come here and just have this like obsession, and just go on and on about it. And then they would go on and on about drinking. Like there was another hang up. And my grandpa used to say, a Baptist, you can always tell a Baptist at a liquor store because they'll leave and they won't talk to you. Try to get out of there quick, Whereas a Catholic will say, hey, man, how's it going? And, he was pointing out that he was claiming they were hypocrites, they would drink, but they wouldn't admit to it. But I don't know about that. All right. What a great stream to stumble upon, says Lurk. Oh, thank you. Very true, says North Life Hollywood. Simply by the addition of these things, it says they have the power. Right. So that's the whole argument about the Bill of Rights. And I agree with it. if you pass a Bill of Rights saying the government can't do these things, you're implying that they have the power to do these things, when what Alexander Hamilton is saying, they never had the power all along. If it's not delegated to them, they don't have the power. It's your power or the state's power, and preferably you personally. So now, conservative, neoconservative, or liberal, both of these groups have an unsound understanding of the Constitution. People say that those freedoms granted us when we are born are ordained by God, and then they will say they don't believe in God, so they leave it all up to the government. Right. They don't like to talk about natural law, God-given rights, because they, A, don't believe in God, and they don't believe in natural law, and they believe that your rights stem from the government. See, so when you take God out of the equation and there's no creation, no creator, then there is only one supreme being, so to speak. That would be the government, to control you and tell you to cover your face, tell you where to go, how close you can stand to people, all these ridiculous things, because they're the God. They'll put you in prison during a war because you said it's a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. I mean, a man literally went to prison because he said he criticized World War I. He went to prison. So clearly that was unconstitutional. I'm a populist, says Joe Biden Stenchers. What percentage of the American population do you think has actually read the Constitution? Guarantee it's single digits, probably less than 1%. And they probably don't know anything about the Constitution, except, basic things that much of which it would be incorrect if you ask them to interpret it. Because you're a crazy beer drinker, Ron. Okay, Whiskey Scout's being, he's using, he's being sarcastic. Ron, are you a capitalist or a libertarian? I don't understand that question. A capitalist is somebody that believes you use the means of production to produce products. Well, a communist is a capitalist. A communist is a capitalist. They use labor, they use equipment, right? They use factories or farms to produce products. And international finance capitalism, which is what we have, it's the same. They might be tyrannical. Also, I would be more like, if you ask me that question, I'd be more like a free enterprise supporter. I support free enterprise. You never hear them really talk about free enterprise on all these news networks, right? They either talk about capitalism or socialism or left-wingism, whatever they say. So I always use the word free enterprise. I always say free enterprise, free enterprise, free. They talk about people baking a cake and then the law violating some law about baking a cake, or a hotel who you can rent to, or these people went to eat at a restaurant and they didn't want to serve them or something like that. I say, well, I'm a free enterprise person. Now, most people, when I talk to them about that on Facebook, they don't seem to understand what I mean. I say, well, I just stand with free enterprise. Oh, what? And then when they talk about this Arab-Israeli conflict, this is the current foreign crisis, right? Arab-Israeli conflict. They're all putting memes on Facebook, with flags and whatnot. I say, I stand with neutrality. That's what I put the other day. I stand with neutrality. And that seemed to baffle many people. I stand with neutrality. Seemed to go over their head. Some people called it, needing a license for a business is pure BS. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I promote free enterprise. I don't support regulations. No one talks about free enterprise. I mean, I'm probably the most free enterprise person you ever met, and I don't support most of these regulations. Reading the Constitution and Bill of Rights was required, and you were tested over it in our high school, in our civics and government class. I agree with that, and it was in my school too. But, the Federalist Papers, they mentioned it, in passing, but they never really taught it. And I can see why, because the Federalist Papers, they're saying the Bill of Rights is dangerous, and they're saying if the government begins to act in a tyrannical manner, then the way states could control that would be by overthrowing the government or breaking away from the government. In other words, supporting secession. So you can imagine that the modern government schools, public schools, are not going to go there. You know, they just want to talk about they had a march in 1965 and this man made a speech. He was a great speaker. He made all these sing-song speeches, you know, and how wonderful he is making all his sing-song speeches, like that 1967 speech, which I mostly memorized, where he says, I don't believe in violence, but if we don't get that money, God only knows what's going to happen to these cities this summer. And I said, yeah, what he's saying, he's making an implied threat that if the federal government doesn't give whoever a bunch of money, that they're going to have riots and burn cities. And I said, this is a person who deserves a holiday, a person who makes speeches with implied threats of violence. Great, that's great. But do you hear that in school? Nah, of course not. You hear it here. The United States is dead and gone. No, I'm not a negative person, King James David. I'm not a negative person. There's a chance it could be saved. I wouldn't necessarily go put bets on that, but it could be saved. It's the one thing to read the U.S. Constitution, says Metal Rocker 94. Read your state constitution as well. Well, I'll tell you what. Try to read the Louisiana Constitution. I bet you it'll take you 50 years. It'll take you 50 years to read it. That's the most horrible constitution. Every amendment is a statute. Every statute is an amendment. If I was the governor of Louisiana, the first thing I would do is say, we have to have a constitutional convention, and I'm writing the Constitution, and y'all going to approve it. Now, believe me, the one you're looking at here, I could write a good state constitution that would be about 10 pages long. Yeah, 10 pages at the most, if I was getting sloppy. The Louisiana Constitution might be 10,000 pages. Ain't nobody going to read that because it makes no sense. Or nullification via the 9th and 10th Amendments. Yeah, I know about all that, what you're saying, but you're missing the point of this whole video, which was that the Bill of Rights was dangerous on its face. See, that's the Hamiltonian argument, that the Bill of Rights is dangerous and should never have been passed. Not to mention the 14th Amendment, the nefarious 14th Amendment, the most horrible amendment in the history of amendments, but that's another video. I actually made a video about that. Enjoy the decline. For a Catholic, as long as you confess your sins on Sunday, you're absolved. Wait, you can confess on Saturday too, or any day of the week, but usually they have confession on Saturday. That's if you have a contrite heart, if you're truly sorry. You understand? Not any other way. You can't be playing a game. For a Baptist, as long as you feel bad while you're doing it, it's fine. Now, I never heard that. Now, I was Baptist for a long time, and I never heard anybody say, as long as you feel bad while you're doing it, it's fine. Oh, that's a joke. Okay. Of course, we know the Baptist theology was, well, if you do something wrong, you feel bad about it, and you ask God to forgive you. It's like confession, you know, in a way. It's like confession. You did wrong. You commit adultery or something. You feel bad. So you ask God to forgive you. You'll be forgiven. The Catholic doctrine is the same in the sense of it, but the Catholic doctrine is more developed in the sense of going along with biblical. Jesus gave the apostles, remember, he said, who send you, retain, they're retaining, who send you, forgive, they're forgiven. He gave them the authority, the keys. You know, the Vatican flag is the keys. He gave the keys to St. Peter, and it was passed on through the apostolic succession, you see. Whereas the Baptists say, oh no, that's no longer in play. But when did it stop being in play? See, that's the question. You see, so that's another video, y'all, because that's why I am Catholic now. I used to be Baptist, but their logical progression broke down, you see, but they never take it to the logical in, they would always just say, well, there's no more apostleship. And then they'll all just say, well, let's go to a picnic and drink iced tea and eat fried chicken. And I would say, hold on, time out. Well, when did it stop? You know, and stuff like that. So I don't think they were too upset when I became Catholic. I was like, well, I'm going to become Catholic. They were probably like, good, get him out of here. He asked too many of these crazy questions. Good questions, though. Great questions. They didn't want to hear about it. You retracted a message. Okay, Prince Harry says the First Amendment is bonkers. Well, Prince Harry's bonkers. You know, let him eat hot cross buns. Are you in the Knights of Columbus? Aren't you, Ron? Therefore, yes, I'm a third-degree knight. A Bill of Rights is bad. Seems like a contradiction. No, you need to go watch this whole video, I'm afraid. Considering we were a country that was committing high crimes and treason against the crown and empire, all because of our rights being violated. Well, that's what the rebels claimed. You know, the American rebels claimed their rights were being violated. But I made a video about that. You know, I mean, if you ask me, do you support the American? Do you think the Americans were right to revolt against the King of England, King George III? My answer would be no, they weren't right. And if I would have been around at the time, I probably would have fought on the British side, helped the king's own army. I mean, let's be honest with y'all. But be that as it may, the Americans did win. The British recognized them, say, oh, well, threw in the towel. They signed a peace treaty, 1783. It was ratified. And so now that's the past. So now the United States was an independent country. And that's what this video is about. The Constitution. It isn't about all of that. The 14th Amendment was obviously needed because of the obviously mentality at the time, which didn't recognize slaves post-civil rights. No, Aaron, the 14th Amendment was not needed. It was set up specifically to create an empire, which is what we have today. Now, if you like the United States empire, if you like dropping atom bombs on civilians, old people in an old folks' home, dropping atom bombs on kids in a baby bed, then you go and support that 14th Amendment, buddy boy. My dad was 5th, 1 degree away from burial send-off. 5th. Oh, well, the 4th degree is the highest level of knighthood. All right. Well, thanks in the Knights of Columbus. Thanks everybody for watching this interesting video on the Bill of Rights. So once again, Alexander Hamilton said the Bill of Rights was a bad idea because it was implying that the U.S. government had power, which it was never given. Right? You don't have to forbid somebody from doing what they don't have the power to do. And that's the main idea of this video. You do not have to forbid someone from doing what they have no power to do. And the government, U.S. government, had no power to restrict your right to bear arms. So you don't need a bill, an amendment implying that they somehow had that power. Was the Bill of Rights violated due to COVID-19? Well, obviously it was. Well, I mean, no, not necessarily, because mostly it was state governments doing that. And then no one ever really got arrested or fined anyway. They just threatened people and people went along with it. Look at all the cases where people just patently refused to follow the rules. They never really prosecuted those people. They just threatened to do. They arrested some people, but go back and check. I bet you all those charges were dropped. I'm bad, but I'm not. My bad. I'm not in, but brother is though. Oh, your brother's in the Knights of Columbus. Okay. Well, join it. You'll like it. You probably enjoy the Knights of Columbus. I enjoy it. You know, don't always enjoy it, but I enjoy it. Usually, you know, I have a great magazine they put out once a month and I read it 10 times a year. Sorry. All right. Anyway, thanks for watching this video production.